a good example of this is like, I can think of a client in particular. I've had this feedback several times, but I can think of a client in particular that I had. She lost 35 pounds with me in 4 months, and then she went on to lose on her own. She left, used the same skills, strategies that I gave her, and she continued to lose another 15 pounds on her own and lose 50 total pounds. And the best part about that is when she signed up, she was like, I want to lose 17 pounds. Welcome back. I know why you're here. You probably want to know how to eat Big Macs and lose fat. No, maybe not. But it kind of ties in what I'm going to talk about here. So this is a very important thing to understand if you're trying to eat healthier, lose weight, or you've already lost weight, you're already eating healthier, and you're like, how the heck do I maintain this now? A lot of angles we can take, but this is one specific concept around nutrition that you got to understand. And this concept is basically understanding the differences between calorie-dense foods that are typically low volume, so they don't take up a lot of space in the stomach, versus nutrient-dense foods, which are typically more healthy, and they're typically higher volume, so they take up more space in the stomach. So if you have no idea what I just said there, I'll explain it for you. So go back to the first one. Calorie-dense foods that are typically lower volume. That'd be like the Big Mac I was talking about. Forget how much Big Mac is like calorie-wise. Say 1,000 calories, 1,200 calories, whatever. Something like that. It's not a low amount of calories, right? But you think about a Big Mac, and apparently the serving size on a Big Mac has been like slowly shrinking, or maybe quickly shrinking, every year for the last decade or two or whatever it is. So it's not even that big of a burger when you think about the actual portion size, the actual volume that it would take. But you eat it, you might not even be full. You might still be even hungry, but you just took in 1,000, 1,200 calories. So something like that would be calorie dense, low volume. The opposite end of the spectrum, something that would be more nutrient dense, lots of vitamins, minerals, macronutrients, maybe fiber, health promoting compounds within that food that take up more space in the stomach, would be stuff like vegetables. Vegetables, leafy greens, lean proteins. When you everything towards that end of the spectrum, you could basically put single ingredient whole foods for the most part. So when you think about like eating quote unquote healthier, those are the foods that I'm talking about in general. That being said, there's a lot of healthy foods that actually are quite calorie dense that are low volume. So this is important to understand because this is where you get into situations where people, they eat healthier. They're like, I have cleaned up my diet. I am eating way healthier. I don't eat fast food nearly as much, if at all. I drink less alcohol. I'm exercising more. And I don't snack on chips after dinner or whatever. It's like, great, you're eating healthier. This is awesome. You probably feel way better. But then those same type of people will often be like, I'm not losing weight. What the heck's going on? And this is why it's important to understand the concept that I'm talking about, these two different ends of the spectrum and what foods where foods get plotted on that spectrum in regards to their calories. Because we need to understand that calories are going to drive energy balance, decide energy balance, which then drive whether you gain weight, whether you maintain your weight, or you lose your weight. And so this is why you could have people eat healthier, which is great. The quality of the food has increased, but their calories haven't changed. And if the calories don't change, but the healthfulness of the food increases, you're still not going to lose weight. So the important thing to understand here is that when we know that calories are going to drive progress, depending on what your actual goal is, then we can decide to eat certain foods based on this, right? So a good example of this would be if someone, to use the example I just gave, right? Somebody who's eating very, very healthy, but they're not seeing changes in their body composition. They would probably they're probably going to need to make changes to their actual output exercise in some way, whether it's walking, cycling, rowing, dancing, swimming, weight training, whatever it is, Pilates, whatever their thing is, they're going to want to make a consistent change to that, probably. But when we're talking about specifically the food side of the equation, they are going to need to look at their foods as it sits on this continuum, this spectrum of calorie-dense, low-volume foods, and then nutrient-dense, high-volume foods. What's probably happening is they're eating a lot of foods probably in the middle and even skewing a little bit more towards these calorie-dense foods, even though they might be generally healthy, right? So a good example of this would be someone who eats, for this example's sake, it's like someone who eats a portion of nuts at breakfast and maybe a piece of toast with peanut butter and then some eggs. So they're like, oh, this is a pretty healthy meal. I would say it's pretty healthy. I look at that. It's pretty healthy. We got some healthy fats in there. We've got some fiber in the bread and the nuts. We've got a ton of different micronutrients across all those different foods. We've got some fats in the peanut butter that you're putting on the toast. You got some fats in the eggs. You got some protein in the eggs. It's great. We got fat, carbs, proteins, well balanced from a macronutrient perspective, lots of nutrients. Good, healthy. But it's also, that is a decently calorie dense food. So that would get plotted somewhere in the middle on this spectrum. It's not super calorie dense, but it's also not super filling, right? So depending on the person and how much you eat, of course. But this could be a situation that someone is in. Because you think about, let's use nuts, for example. That's part of that meal that I just said. Those nuts are going to be, if you look at how many calories it is for the certain portion size, like if you go out and you have some mixed nuts or trail mix or whatever it is, even just a pack of salted almonds or whatever it is in your cupboard, take out and then weigh out and measure perfectly exactly one serving size of whatever that says on the package. And you'll be very surprised at like, oh, that little amount right there is 300 calories. That's crazy. And that doesn't make it unhealthy. And nuts are still a very healthy food, provided you tolerate them well and digest them well. But that is an important thing to look at, as opposed to just eating healthier if you do want to make body composition changes, right? And then add on to that, if we think about that person's meal that I gave as the example, then they have a piece of toast, which then they threw on a bunch of fat onto the toast, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Nothing wrong with peanut butter, provided you're not allergic. But the problem could be that we've now added even more calories onto something. And then with the eggs, maybe they're cooking with a bunch of oils on top of that. And then there's a bunch of fat added onto that even more so. Maybe on the toast, it's not just the peanut butter. Maybe they put jam on it. Maybe they put honey on it. So again, not necessarily unhealthy. This sounds like a healthy meal to me still, but we're putting a lot of calories into the meal that don't really add any satiety, which would be fullness. They don't really add any fullness to the sensation during the meal. So a good example of how you could adjust that meal, just using that example, is you could go, if someone was eating these 3 whole eggs, I'm just using that as the example, is maybe they're having 3. So maybe what they do is they do 1 or 2 whole eggs with the yolk, and then they do the rest with egg whites, which are going to be much leaner, but we're still going to get a ton of protein there. Then with the toast, maybe they don't even change the toast. Maybe they do the toast with peanut butter, and if they're doing jam or honey, just take the jam or honey off. I like a little bit of sprinkled salt on the peanut butter. It helps the flavor come out, just tastes better. And then with the nuts, I would just scrap the nuts. If we want fiber in the meal, I would just make sure that the bread that they're getting for the toast is some type of whole wheat, heavy fiber bread. And then, just completely remove the nuts altogether. And then from that perspective, if we've added in a bunch of the egg whites to the meal, and then we took out the nuts, we might even have the same level of fullness, of satiety in the meal. So the same level of volume of food, but the calorie count has now gone down, right? So if we can start looking at meals like this, ways to pull down the calories, but keep the volume of the food similar, that's a great first step to assessing, then manipulating your actual meals so that you're still eating healthy for the most part, but you've now decreased the total calories, which are going to help you with the body composition changes you want. If someone's trying to gain weight, you would do the opposite of this, but I'm using this from a weight loss perspective because I primarily work with people who want to lose weight. So this is something that you could do, right? If we were going to go, use someone as an example that doesn't even eat very healthy yet, and they're in a position where they do eat a lot of fast food, they eat a lot of chips, a lot of French fries, and things of this nature, then donuts would be a good one. Any pastries, really, any baked goods are going to be good examples of this because they're not going to be, they might be, some of them might actually be pretty decent portion, but even the ones that aren't, it's like you look at the actual size of whatever it is, you just take a donut, right? That isn't huge. And then if you could assess the calories on that, you'd probably be surprised at how many are in there and be like, oh my goodness, this barely takes up any space in my stomach. I could absolutely eat 5 of these and not even be full yet. But I just inhaled, 900 calories. Like, holy crap. So that's the problem when we get to when we're at the place where we haven't even started to eat healthier yet, but the calories are just so much higher. And then the problem that happens or can happen, especially mentally, that someone will have is if they're in that place, they're like, well, I want to lose weight, but I love donuts, which makes sense. I love pizza, that makes sense. I love ice cream. Great. Like, these are all great foods. They're all delicious. You could probably make them healthier or less healthy depending on homemade or where you're getting them or whatever. But they start thinking, well, I want to lose weight, but I don't want to eat less, which to some extent you will have to eat less, right? But this is an important thing to consider when you understand everything that I just explained, is that you don't have to eat less food right away anyway. You have to eat less calories. So we want to consume less calories, but we don't have to necessarily eat less food. A good example of this is like, I can think of a client in particular. I've had this feedback several times, but I can think of a client in particular that I had. She lost 35 pounds with me in 4 months, and then she went on to lose on her own. She left, used the same skills, strategies that I gave her, and she continued to lose another 15 pounds on her own and lose 50 total pounds. And the best part about that is when she signed up, she was like, I want to lose 17 pounds. And it was kind of mind-blowing. She was mind-blown when she was like, I can't believe I signed up wanting to lose 17 pounds. Like, I didn't even realize I had 50 pounds to lose. I feel amazing. So that was really, really cool. But I remember one piece of feedback that she had is that she was very surprised at how much food she was eating when I gave her meals when she signed up with my coaching program. And the reason for that is because she went from eating like half a bag of Crispers or a full bag of Crispers for dinner sometimes to having, some chicken breasts, chicken thighs, maybe some beef or something, with some potatoes, rice, vegetables or greens on the side with some type of seasoning and sauce to flavor it all up. And because of that, she was eating much higher protein. She was eating much higher fiber, a lot more vegetables and greens. So the actual food volume went, probably tripled or quadrupled, like way higher. So then we could actually increase how much actual food she was eating, but her calories that she was consuming went way down. It was a fraction of that. So she was able to lose weight while eating more food. And a lot of people have this very confused because there is like a big myth that I think still continues to pervade like throughout the fitness world, the diet industry or whatever, particularly with consumers. And I think some coaches fall prey to this as well, but definitely a lot of consumers end up very, very confused when they're trying to understand these concepts, because they're like, okay, well, people are telling me that I'm not eating enough food to lose weight. When really the problem is we need to go back to that original premise of like, eat enough food or eat enough calories. And then understanding like, how do we even drive fat loss in the first place, right? So if we circle back to what I even talked about, it's like, we need to make sure that we are managing our calories, because that is what's going to drive fat loss. If we're eating too many calories, we will gain weight. If we are eating the amount of calories it takes to, or if we're matching the amount of calories it takes to maintain our current body weight, we will maintain. If we are under eating our calories, we will lose weight. It's that simple, those 3 things. And there's a lot of strategies depending on the person, that we can utilize to make either one of those three things happen depending on the person's goal. So if someone's trying to lose weight, like my client was that I was talking about, for her, all I did was I changed her total eating, or her total nutritional pattern, her entire kind of diet landscape, so that she was eating a lot more protein regularly throughout the day, multiple times. She was eating a lot more vegetables, fruits, and fibrous breads and greens. And then she was eating adequate fats, but being very mindful of it because fats can be very sneaky, which I'll get into in a second as well. And then we were eating until satiety or a little bit less. So she wasn't overeating at any of these meals. And so when she did that, she was able to feel satisfied, feel reasonably full without overeating, and in a way that her calories were low enough that she was able to lose weight while still being like, I'm eating a lot of food. This is actually not that hard. And that's one of the best places you can put somebody, because it is a very uncomfortable place to be when you feel like you're very, very restrictive, which is a common experience for a lot of people that have gone through a lot of like fad diets or extreme diets, where you're cutting out carbs, you're cutting out certain food groups, you're cutting out dairy, you're cutting out sugar, you're cutting out animal meats, you're cutting out lectins or nightshades or whatever the rules are of your specific diet that you choose to follow. And it's very hard to be sustainable with something like that. And I don't think that's particularly helpful from a sustainability perspective, but it's also not helpful from the perspective of like even understanding how this game even works. You know, if you can just understand the actual game of, we need to manipulate calories, and there's a million different strategies to do that for each person, and there's no one size fits all. And then on top of that, one of the strategies to understanding that is this can come from understanding this concept of like calorie dense foods that are low in volume versus nutrient dense foods that are typically higher volume. And there's this spectrum. And then you can kind of roughly plot every food along that spectrum. And once you do that, then you can make informed decisions around what foods you're going to eat. I said I was going to talk about fats in particular. Fats are super important. So to even back up, right? We got three major macronutrients. We have protein, we have carbohydrates, and we have fats. And then kind of the unofficial fourth macronutrient would be like alcohol, okay? They all have different calories per amount. So how we measure it is calories per gram. So in protein, we have 4 calories per gram. In carbohydrates, we have 4 calories per gram. In fats, we have 9 calories per gram. With alcohol, we have 7 calories per gram. This is important to understand because protein being 4 calories per gram, if we choose relatively lean proteins, then most of the time, then we can probably push protein reasonably high, particularly because protein is very expensive for the body to go through a process where if it's overeating it, it can then convert it into a state where it could be stored as excess body fat. That's less important for people to understand, but just important to understand that we can leverage protein a little bit more aggressively for a situation like this. There's a lot of benefits to protein that basically make it a good reason to do this. But that's one of it, is that it's 4 calories per gram. Because then we go to carbohydrates, 4 calories per gram. And if you think about carbohydrates, we have starches, we have sugars, we have fibers. Those are kind of the 3 main carbohydrates. So when we think about that, think about sugars, think about a can of Coca-Cola. That's usually like the demonized stereotype of like an unhealthy food, right? Or an unhealthy drink. I don't necessarily believe in that because I take a little bit more holistic approach to like what's healthy and what's not. But I don't think Coca-Cola is inherently unhealthy, but I do think that it is a calorie-dense, low-filling food. You have a can of Coke, you might feel fine in the meantime, but you probably could drink a can of Coke and eat an entire meal on top of it because it just doesn't take that much space in your stomach, but you're going to get 35 to 40 grams of sugar in there or whatever it is in a can of Coke. And we take that 40 grams and then we multiply that by 4, and it's like that's how many calories we got in just one of those small cans of Coke. So that's what we want to consider too. So protein and carbohydrates are both 4 calories per gram. Then we get to fat. Fat is 9 calories per gram. This is an important concept to understand because this is, I like talking about fat, not in a way that to demonize it, but just to be mindful of it because fat is extremely important for hormone health, immune health, skin health, cognitive health. There's a ton of reasons to consume enough fat. And if you're eating a very low fat diet, you're going to be in trouble. It's not going to be a good idea. And it's not very sustainable either. But that being said, because fat is 9 calories per gram, that's over double the calories per gram that's in carbohydrates or protein. Because of that, it can be very, very sneaky as far as the calories that it adds to our meals without noticing. And something to consider within that is if you think about what foods are typically very fattening, the specific single ingredient foods, so things like butters, nut butters, nuts in general, really, but different fatty oils, and things of that nature, it doesn't really take up that much space in our stomach. So it's lower volume. So it's lower food volume. It's calorie dense, although it's healthy, but it can really sneak up. So you think about it, if you're not measuring salad dressing, sauces, cooking oils, things like this, they can add 1, 2, 300 calories to a meal without actually visually looking any different at the meal or taking up any extra space in the stomach. And while it's very, very healthy, we need to consider that we are trying to manipulate the calories if we're trying to change your body composition and or lose weight. So this is where if you're just eyeballing these dressings, these sauces, you're cooking, the oils that you're cooking with, then you could be in a position where you're eating a 800 calorie meal that could very easily be reduced down to 600 calories, a lot leaner, but still have adequate fats just by changing the fat content of the meal. So that's an important kind of little aside to consider when we're having this conversation around calorie dense foods that are high volume and calorie dense foods that are low volume, don't take up much space, versus nutrient dense foods that are higher volume, that take up more space. Fats are one of those that are, especially if we'll just assume that they're healthy. We're going with a lot of healthier fats. When we're considering like healthier fat foods, they are very, very healthy, like I just said. But a lot of people, if they hyper focus on what is healthy, they may not make the changes to their body composition or their weight loss journey that they want because they're not actually addressing the calories in their meals. They're just looking at, well, it's healthy, so I should be able to lose weight. And for some people, if they're already eating very unhealthy, they start eating healthier, that will actually have an effect on the calories in a negative sense. And by negative, I mean it's decreased. So if they've decreased the calories enough just from changing their foods to be a lot more healthy, they're going to probably lose weight. But at some point, they'll stop losing weight and then be like, well, I don't know how to eat healthier. I'm already eating really healthy. And that's where it's like, yeah, it's not just about eating healthier. It's also about eating in a way that decreases how many calories we're eating relative to how many calories you require to maintain your current body fat, to maintain your current body weight. So this is something that I talk about with all of my clients, because a lot of people, when they come to work with me, they don't understand this concept, and that's often why they're struggling. And then once you understand this, it becomes a lot simpler, right? There's a lot of different ways that you could kind of navigate through this. Some people are going to tolerate different foods. Some people don't tolerate other foods, whatever. But when we understand this, it's a really good, it's a really powerful thing to understand, because then you actually just feel a lot more confident around how to select foods based on the body composition goal that you have, as opposed to just being like, I'm just trying to eat healthier, which is awesome. But depending on the goal that you have, that may not be enough. And it probably is for a certain amount of time, particularly if you're not eating healthy right now. But at some point, you're going to stall, you're going to struggle, you're going to plateau, and you're going to be like, I don't know what to do now. And if you don't understand the difference between the actual calories in your food and the healthfulness of food and how those are not the same thing, even though they overlap, then you're going to struggle for a while. So hopefully that helped you. Hopefully you understand this concept a lot better now, and you can take it and you can apply it to your own fitness goals right now. If you have any questions about this, you can DM me on Instagram at I am Tim Walcott, or you can just post a comment below on this video if you're watching on YouTube, and I'll answer it there. I'm happy to give you advice on this if you have questions around this, because you may be the type of person that I'm kind of talking about here that's struggling with making these body composition changes because you don't understand this concept yet. So let me know. I'm happy to help. And make sure that you like this video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for next week when we drop another episode. Thanks again for watching.